If you listen to the show, you already know that we cannot exist without our sponsors. They are the ones who make things happen behind the scenes. So let's acknowledge Fuji Sports. We've been working with these guys for a while now, not only as far as this podcast is concerned, but also at the RŌL Academy. We've had their gear. I personally use their gis. What a phenomenal product.
Yeah, I mean, Jiu Jitsu, Judo, MMA, tape, bags, anything you need for your Jiu Jitsu journey, you can find at fujisports.com.
Let's talk RŌL TV. There's so much content on there. It's ridiculous at this point. But I think what is even more intriguing, as time went on during the project, we've been recording most of the events that were taking place here at RŌL Academy. At this point, I mean, we have guys like Chris Howder, Armand Fadi, Rafael Lovato Sr., and Pete the Greek. I mean, there were so many different events that we've kind of recorded it. Don't you think that's amazing? I mean, points of reflection and kind of going back for all the students to see what really happened and refresh their memory.
Yeah, I think it's great, being able to go back and look at all these high-level practitioners, Octavio Cudo, like one of the names you didn't mention. And I mean, just these guys that have been doing this for so long come in, teach these amazing seminars and workshops, and it's all recorded and there for you to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to get additional savings on all this, type in code RŌL Radio at the coupon and get additional 30% off of your membership.
Nice. Go to rolacademy.tv. What's up, everyone, and welcome back. If you haven't already, please remember to hit the like, share, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review where you do listen. That ensures that we can continue bringing you the great guests and amazing content that you have come to expect. Today's guest has been training martial arts since the age of 6. He says, you name it, I've probably taken part in it. Jay Zeballos joins us to discuss what he believes a true martial artist is, his instruction style, what separates jiu-jitsu from traditional martial arts, and his relationship with Jean Jacques Machado. Here is the RŌL Radio with instructor at Jean Jacques Machado's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, author, podcast, and the man Jean Jacques has set as his left and right arm, Professor Jay Zeballos.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we are live.
Here we go.
Another great episode ahead of us.
I don't know. We haven't started yet. I told you, I always have low expectations. That way there's only one place to go.
I gotta tell you, you can ruin the best moment. Like you just totally destroy this.
It's an art form that I've perfected over my 52 years.
Is that what it is?
It is.
Is it an art form?
Do you know anybody who could do it as well as me? No, right?
No.
Yes.
Oh boy!
I can stop it.
This episode is going places.
It's going to be wonderful. Now it's going to be wonderful.
All right, let's roll with this. Let's bring our guest in, Professor Jay Zeballos, in the house. How are you, sir?
I'm doing amazing. How are you guys?
Wonderful.
Thanks for being here. Before we get deep into the serious level, I can't help notice all the cool stuff that you have behind you. And if you guys are watching this on YouTube, I mean, you can see, I see a gi, and there's some martial art or some Japanese swords in there.
Yeah, you can kind of tell it's my life. I've done, you name it, I've probably partaken in it at some point in my time on this earth. But martial arts has been a mainstay for the last. I'm 55, so since I started at 6 years old. But yeah, the kimono is very special. That was given to me at a time in my jiu-jitsu journey when I was going through some really hard times, financially, professionally, a lot of things. And I didn't have much of a gi rotation. I was teaching, and you can't let the gis get too bad. And Jean Jacques gave me that one. It was one of his, and he's like, just here, use this. And I used it for a long time. I competed in it. And then life got so much better for me, and things started to flourish. But I kept that one folded away. And then one day I saw it, because I tend to, which has become more of a general practice for me. I start purging things now. I accumulate and then I let go. But that I could not let go. And I just thought to myself, what can I do with this thing? And I thought, you know what? I'm going to ask him to sign it and I'll hang it over my desk. And that is my constant reminder to be grateful for where I am today. This is a very, very special thing for me.
What a phenomenal story. But you mentioned something actually interesting is oftentimes, we collect things, and I don't even mean materialistic items, but thoughts and concepts and just in our head and, body and so on. And there is this thought in the world where in order for us to receive more, we have to let go of some of the older things. They are no longer quote unquote useful or purposeful in our lives. And I think this is what you're referring to. Am I correct here?
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. I have a student. He is he's sober, but he is an addict. I mean, he was addicted to alcohol. So Jiu Jitsu changed his life. But I was explaining this process to him, and he said in AA they have an expression: in order to keep it, you have to give it away. And that's kind of the way I approach a lot of things. It's like, when you jiu-jitsu, when you study, especially if you want to become, if you find that at some point you want to take this art and take it beyond merely being a student, merely being a black belt, you want to start teaching. There has to be a balance. I'm consuming, but I have to give back too. Jean Jacques has often told me, you don't want to be a harp player. You don't want to be pulling everything in. It has to go out too. So that's just a principle I apply to everything that I do now. I'm very much, I'm mindful of the balance in my life. If I start to accumulate, I have to either discard, donate, share, but there has to be a healthy purge. And that just keeps my head straight. So it's something that I really believe in.
So I'm curious, how do you identify the things that need to depart? Is there a special way in your mind that you have some kind of identification process, or you simply shoot off the hip? I haven't used this in a while. I haven't talked to that person in a while. Or how is that going in your mind?
Yeah, no, when it comes to relationships, no, there's never a purge. Like I have friends. Ironically, New Year's Eve, I was sitting on my couch and I was thinking about some friends that I used to train another martial art with. I haven't talked to in probably 8 or 9 years. And it's not because I didn't want to talk to them, but when the school that I used to train at shut down, we all just kind of went our separate ways. For a while, we clung together, but then as my life got busy, their lives got busy, we just kind of stopped. And I reached out to one, I sent a group text and I'm like, hey man, I'm just thinking about you guys. I hope you're doing well. And one of them called me right back, and his very first words after 8 years of not hearing my voice, he's like, man, I love you, Jay. Like, thanks for reaching out. He's kind of going through a tough time, thinking about life and everything. And it was just like a little connection. So my friendships are always there. Because I'm one of those people, if I don't talk to you for 10 years, that I have a healthy understanding that, life pulls us in different directions. I don't demand that kind of commitment from you. But when it comes to material possessions, unless it has a real significance in my life, I've become very adept at just discarding. A lot of it is just simply because it started with, oh, this shirt reminds me, like I had my wardrobe used to be, I had probably 100 IBJJF shirts. And it was just like, oh, I remember this tournament, that tournament. I got to keep these. I don't want to get rid of these. And then one day I just thought, the shirt doesn't really matter. It's like the experience is what I carry within me. And what am I going to do with these shirts? They're going to just deteriorate. No one's going to want them. Who's going to want a shirt that I've worn and kept for 10 plus years? For the record, I don't have children. So I just thought, you know what? It's going to hurt. Take them all, put them in a bag, send them to Goodwill. And while I'm driving to Goodwill, I'm thinking about it. I leave the bag there. I get in my car. I'm halfway home and I realize, that wasn't that hard. Like as soon, it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. So it is a muscle that you have to develop, just like anything else. I got to make sure that I don't go overboard and, oh, I haven't used this in a while. I'm going to throw it away. I'm going to use this in a while. I'm going to throw it away. But I just want to make sure there's not an unhealthy accumulation of things that in the grand scope of things are just not really important. And I feel like they weigh you down.
Do you have the similar philosophy when it comes to jiu-jitsu itself? I mean, what I mean by this, in order for us to make a progression forward and continue evolving and educating ourselves with this beautiful thing that we all love, we have to let go of some things, and we have to open our mind in a way to be willing to adopt new concepts as this huge thing continues evolving, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's one of the magical things about the art that is completely different than most martial arts, in that there is no limit to the technical palette. Like a traditional martial art, you have your set forms, you have your set techniques. There's generally a curriculum at each belt level. Then you get to a certain point, and then it becomes more about the mastery of what you've already learned. But there's very little extensions of the branches of techniques. Whereas jiu-jitsu, I tell people all the time, whether it's myself or Jean Jacques, tonight we're going to go over how to secure the mount and do the cross choke from the mount. That's a lesson that I've been taught or have taught 1,000 times. But every time you go back to it, there's always some little nuance, some little snippet of information that slips out that you don't realize you do, and you verbalize it. Or in the case with Jean Jacques, there's just some new level of his technique, the evolution of how he teaches, that I'm like, whoa, I've been here. I'll joke around with the white belts. I'm like, I've been here 25 years and I'm just now seeing this, and you're a white belt. Consider yourself lucky, because that's what makes the art so stimulating. It's never ending. It's limitless.
So on the flip side, let me ask you this. How come some are so resistant to that very open-minded approach? Why do, as humans, we are so stuck up on, I've done this 50 times. They taught this in the fundamentals class so many times. I'm just bored in the core class, and why don't I go to the advanced class? When can I go to, when can I take to the next level? Why we are so stubborn on that?
I think that goes back to something similar. I read, not a lot, but when I have free time, I read. And one of my favorite books is a book called The Wisdom of Insecurity by Alan Watts. He's like a famous Zen philosopher. And one of the greatest quotes I've ever read was, I'll just make it short. His quote is, "Belief clings, faith lets go." So when you're speaking from the standpoint of a traditionalist or somebody who's just learning martial arts, and it's like, this is what I've learned, I'm inside this box, this is my truth, this is what I'm just going to practice, and beyond this, there's really nothing else to learn. You close the door to what's out there. You're clinging so hard to what you think you know and you think you understand. You have to let go. You have to let go and just be open-minded to the idea that there's so much more out there. The way I always tell people is like, the art is so much bigger. As an instructor, you feel like it's kind of like, I'm teaching this amazing art, but I'm teaching something that I can't even possibly understand. I tell students all the time, they're like, "What are you working on, Jay? What's the latest and greatest for you?" And I'm like, "Man, I'm just still trying to get my hip escape down." It's like, you can never stop learning enough. If my hip escape was better, it'd be harder for you guys to hold me down, And I think my hip escape after 25 years is pretty good, but I will never believe that I have that mastered. Because that's what I think is the true nature of a martial artist, is always chasing the perfection that will never come.
I was about to ask, literally, is like, so are you chasing the tail, essentially? Are you chasing something that you will never reach?
Yes.
At the same time, that could be very discouraging for somebody who is just starting, no? I mean, this is so fascinating for me.
Well, no, yes and no. This is the problem with, and not, of course, this is just a generalization, but
of course,
young instructors, newer instructors, and I kind of have to lump them in there, underbelts that have the best of intentions can overteach. You can throw too much at a student right away.
Oh, yes.
And that's the problem. You only give the student enough enough tangible material that they can immediately implement into their game and execute. Their execution is going to be flawed. It's going to be rough. That's the journey. They have to get that good. And then as they get that good, you start to add layers and layers to their technique. So there's never a point to where I show you this is the whole technique. And then you tell me, well, I can't do it. Well, the reality is you can't. You're brand new. You have to start with something very tangible that you can immediately execute. I tell everybody, just a basic example, armbar from the guard, like a staple of Jiu Jitsu. Most of the time we teach the whole technique, how to move around and then throw the legs up, you get the armbar, and then you watch the struggle. The new students cannot do it. And I'm like, yeah, you can't. There's too many moving parts. You're spinning too many plates right now, and you're still trying to figure out how to move. What I want you to do, I'll show them the whole technique, but then I'll say, when you get out there, all I want to see you do for this round, hold the guy's elbow, put your foot on his hip, and turn your hip. That's it. He's going to rip his elbow out. He's going to reset with you. And I want you to do it again and do it again and do it 1,000 times. Because that is something you can implement immediately. You can do it. It's a micro technique that will lead to something much bigger. But you get that down, then you're going to see how you're going to start to control that arm. And then in time, you're going to start catching the arm. But if I try to take you from point A to point Z as a new student, that is chasing your tail. You will struggle so much. I just want to get you from point A to point B first. And then you add layers to their teaching. I know for myself, that was always my approach. And I find I get a lot of success out of that with students, because if a student can feel like they've accomplished something, because the problem with martial arts, and especially jiu-jitsu, we equate success with I submitted the guy, or I swept the guy, or I passed his guard. If you're a new student, none of that's going to happen. Yeah. Keep your base, keep your defense tight. If you can go this whole round and you don't let them sweep you, that's all I want to see you do. Keep your balance. If they armbar you, that's fine. My goal isn't for you to not get submitted. My goal right now with you is to not fall. And you give them tangible goals, and then you build upon that.
So with that in mind, do you think that submissions are a distraction in a way for some of the beginning students? Or maybe even like the passing guard, like the finishing product. You know what I mean by that? Like, obviously you've been on the mat so much longer than I have, but like I even see myself with my students, like the submission is like, the candy, like the carrot is like the carrot.
Yes.
Like, oh yeah, I want that. If I don't get that, I am not succeeding. This just sucked today. I didn't submit anybody. Do you think that's like big distraction for a lot of students?
It can be. I mean, I think as an instructor, you want to make sure your students feel satisfied and fulfilled, that you'll give them a little excitement. So we will teach them the submission, but their priority in the beginning, I said, you have one goal in here as a new student, and that's to survive. So everything is based on defense. How can you possibly do an armbar on somebody if you're the one getting armbarred? You have to develop your defense first, develop the comfortability and then the confidence. Once you get that confidence, then we can start to turn you loose and help encourage your offense. But the challenge is, if I make offense your objective, you're going to become so frustrated because it's just not going to work. In order to develop good offense, you have to be bulletproof to a certain extent anyway. Understand, how do I protect myself in every position? How do I make the opponent work hard before they can get me? Once my defense starts to flourish, I'm like, okay, now you're ready to learn how to attack. But if we go the other way around, then you're gonna be more of a therapist than an instructor, because you're going to be talking that person off the ledge all the time,
Yeah, that's the hard part, I think, for many out there, right? You have this shiny thing, submission or pass or sweep, and yet so often as instructors, we talk about defense mechanisms, frames, space, these boring things. They're so important and so fundamental. And do you think that's why jiu-jitsu is so complex, and perhaps one of the reasons why many don't continue it for extensive period of time?
Oh, there's definitely a frustration factor. There's definitely a weeding out. That's why I think today, especially in the way jiu-jitsu is set up today, part of the good culture of an academy is you have to make sure the culture is an environment where if you have all the students understand that every new student that comes in is an investment in all of your development. If we get a new student in here and you make them feel good, you help them, you encourage them, your job is to make them as good as possible, as fast as possible. So when you train with them, you got to do what you got to do. Practice your submissions. I mean, we always say that you practice your submissions on the lower ranks, but when they're brand new, you got to kind of help them along and encourage them and get them a little inspired. I mean, at our school, we get new students, and you'll see some of our more seasoned athletes. I watch them. They let the guy sweep them. They let the guy take their back. I mean, even sometimes you'll see some of the guys, they let them do the submission. They kind of talk them into it, but they encourage them because it's just like competition. Getting the body ready is super easy. It's getting the mind to believe, to have faith, and just understand that you'll get there if you know that you're in an environment where you're not going to get negative reinforcement, that people are going to encourage you. And what I always just tell everybody, I'm like, look around. If you're a new student, if you get a little frustrated, take a break, sit and watch the training. And watch these people. These people are no different than you. You are no different than I was 25 years ago. I came in, I didn't know anything. I really struggled. I mean, I have stories upon stories of how I wasn't even sure if I could do this, much less forget about teaching it. So it can be done, but you just have to have the right environment to help, because you're planting seeds to help encourage you and help you grow.
That's the hard part, right? Having that vision ahead and confidence and almost a belief that the system that you're buying into will return based on the investment that you are making. I think that's one of the biggest struggles a lot of students have within the first year, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like interesting, like the white belt is all about survival, right? Blue belt, like you kind of sort of know what you're doing. You have some understanding of what is going on. And those are the hardest points of time during the jiu-jitsu. You know, once you get to that purple belt, like strong blue belt or purple belt, then you rarely see people quitting after that. After that is just you kind of enjoying the ride. Have you noticed the same thing?
Oh yeah. I try to explain that white belt is a struggle, but I tell all of them, I'm like, you're going to hit this magic point when it's going to start to click. Mm-hmm. And that is a beautiful time when it starts to click and you can kind of feel your body starting to do the things naturally that you're always trying to think about doing. Yeah. And that's when you see that they make that marked jump, and then they get into the blue belt level. And then every belt, Jean Jacques has told me this, it's primarily at the black, but even the blue belt, the student will embrace the new belt or they'll run from it. Because you realize you got the blue belt and you understand now it's like, I'm not a beginner anymore, but oh my God, has the level just jumped up? Yep. Because now you cannot, this is when, in order to develop good students, technically solid students, I'll start to put a little bit of healthy pressure on you. There's a little bit more expectation. You move up in rank. You can't train like a beginner anymore. You got to push yourself more. You got to do everything that you went through at white belt. You got to do twice as hard. The training's going to be twice as rough, you know. And like the joke I always tell men, you better oil your ankles too, because now they get to go after your feet. So, you know, you have all these things, but you got to embrace it, because it will change your life if you stay on course. That's the most important thing.
And that's why I think that, you know, the blue belt blues or whatever, that's why we lose so many people, is because they don't know that it's going to happen all over again. And it seems like we're talking a lot about setting realistic expectations for people, but to me, sometimes it seems pretty hard to do in the moment or in the class of 30, and people kind of get lost. And how do you set them up from day one?
I mean, you know, I don't believe at all that this is unique to us, but just, the formula that we have is that you have to establish a connection with every student, every single student, every new student. I don't care who it is. I know the name of every student in our school. When we start class, whether it's Jean Jacques teaching, myself, or one of the other instructors, I walk on the mat and I shake every single student's hand. I acknowledge them by their name. Most of the time, I can't, depending on the size of the class, I can't spend a lot of time, but there's always some element of, how you doing? How's the family? You're good, everything good. And then you move on. And then when you do the lesson and then everyone's drilling, I don't just walk around and kind of look and you guys okay? I'll get down on my knees and like, let me see, what are you doing here? And kind of, even if I know they got it, just help them along a little bit. And it's the constant declarations. Like, I always like when I see a student do something, it's like, beautiful. I love it. Perfect. Great job. It's just a little affirmation. And when they train randomly, every week, it's just different people, but randomly I'll just sit there and watch somebody and then I'll just go up to them and I'm like, hey man, your jiu-jitsu's it's doing really good. Or if I see them stuck, I'll run over and say, okay, stop. When you get here, I'd like to see you do this. Okay, now when you get here, and I kind of solve a little solution that they're dealing with, and you can just see them light up like, oh, wow, yeah, this has been bothering me. Not anymore. Now we shut the door to that. So a little bit of attention, a little bit of affirmation. That's how you create an addiction. It sounds bad, but that's what I do. It's like I give you the goods to help your physical development and your emotional development. So that every time you come to the academy, that's where you're going to get it. You're not going to get it for most people, unfortunately, they're not going to get it at work. Not so much at school, but at our academy, for sure you're going to get it. We're always mindful of every student, and you always give that little every so often. You'll do it every class, but every so often, because that's what Jean Jacques did to me at one point in my career when I was a blue belt and I was really struggling. I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional, but he kind of chased me down in the locker room, and I was fine. Like, I was not sulking. I gave no body language to indicate that I was troubled in any way. But he followed me into the locker room and he just said, hey, I just want to let you know your jiu-jitsu has jumped more considerably in the last 6 months. And I was a white belt. And man, I think I was floating out of there when I left. It encouraged me so much. So you think about that stuff and it's like, I want the students to feel that as well. So you do the best you can with everyone, and just that's the work.
Sometimes the simple pat on the back, the simple handshake, even sometimes a smile, thumbs up, those little things, they just light up the student, and you can tell that their confidence is going out through the roof. What did you think that day when Jean Jacques chased you down the hall and he told you that your jiu-jitsu was unstoppable and you were amazing?
Yeah, and I was, at the time, I think I was 28 or 29, and I felt like that 6-year-old kid again. Yeah. To get that kind of affirmation from someone like him. And, I'm still a white belt. And prior to that, I was really struggling. I share this story all the time. I had been training most of my life. I used to compete in point fighting and forms, traditional karate tournaments. When I went to jiu-jitsu, it was such a completely different animal that they had an in-house tournament, and I entered it as a white belt. And I'd been training maybe 8 or 9 months, and I got smoked. 2 matches, I got submitted under a minute in each match. And I was just thinking, why am I doing this? This was just, I felt embarrassed. I was depressed. I mean, I was just like, this is crazy. But I thought, I enjoy it. So I kind of resigned myself to the fact that even if I'm never going to be good at this, I'll still do it because I enjoy it. But at the end of that event, he gave everybody a certificate. First, second, third. I think there were only 3 guys in my division, so naturally I got third. I almost threw it out because I'm like, this is humiliating. Why do I have this? I got destroyed and I get this, and I was going to tear it up, but I thought, no, that would be really disrespectful. So I kept it, drove home. By the time I got home, I'm like, okay, you know what? life goes on. I'm going to go back. And I kept training. And it was like 6 months later, that's when he told me that about my jiu-jitsu jumping up. And it definitely lifted me emotionally. Not that I was down, but it was a jump. And then a couple of months later, he had another, it was a little bit of a bigger tournament. He opened it up to other schools and I competed. I had 2 matches. I submitted both guys. He gave me my gold medal. And then the first day back in class, he gave me my blue belt. So years later, I didn't do it at the time, but years later, what I did is I framed that certificate and I put the medal around it. And that was another visual, like, no matter how bad things get, you can never give up. You have to always just keep pushing. If you have people around you, because you'll have people that post inspirational things that say, keep fighting, never give up. But you know them and you're like, no, this person is nothing at all like that. This is just, they're trying to get likes or followers. But when you have somebody like Jean Jacques, and if you know his history, and I'm sure you guys do, and he's telling you, hey, and no matter what life throws at you, you can never give up. Those are some pretty big shoes to fill, some expectations you want to stand up to. I got a taste of that during that experience. So I just hung that on my wall, and that was always like my reminder, because I really believe in that. I like having visual reminders all around me to kind of just keep me straight, keep me motivated. It's just like watching TV, or food. Garbage in, garbage out. I want healthy reminders of how to live my life. And that was one of them.
Good for you. What a phenomenal story. Let's take this back a little bit. You said you started at age of 6. What was that reason for you stepping? And I'm making an assumption, but it was not jiu-jitsu at that point. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, no. I'm gonna really date myself. This was like around 1975, and we lived right in the heart of Hollywood, and and my parents wanted to get me in something. So there was a very famous guy named William Faulkner, and William Faulkner was a drama teacher, but he also taught fencing and dance. But fencing, he taught Errol Flynn. Like, he taught the celebrities how to fence for the movies. So my parents signed me up there. I did fencing, I did dance, I did drama. I did it because I was a little kid, and there was nothing, I'm like, okay, I'll do this. And then one day my dad and my uncle used to take me to LA to watch the Kung Fu movies. But one day we went and I saw Bruce Lee. And I remember, I'll never forget that. I saw Bruce Lee on the big screen, and he wasn't flying through the air and like the mystical make-believe wire work. Mm-hmm. He was just fighting. And I watched the way he moved, and I'm like, I want to do that. And I told my dad, I don't want to go back to that place. I want to do that. And he said, okay, when we find a school. And my dad was pretty strict. My dad's still alive, but when I was a kid, he was pretty strict. He took me he took me around on a Saturday to go run an errand. And we're inside this building, and I could faintly hear the Kia, Kia, Kia. I could hear like all these screaming. And I looked, and it's like a cul-de-sac, and right across the street is a martial arts studio. I'm pulling on his shirt going, Dad, look. And he's like, okay, just hang on, because we were in line. We were at the post office. He's like, hang on, let me finish this and we'll go. I ran out the door. This was in Hollywood. Yeah. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to get my butt whipped for this, but it'll be worth it. So I ran over there. Yeah, I ran inside, and sure enough, it was a kids class. There were like 50 kids in there. And the sensei, this is mid-70s. It was in Hollywood, but it was the sign had School of Martial Arts Discipline. It was Taekwondo, but it was old school martial arts. He had a stick. And I'm watching this, and it was just magic. I'm like, I want to do this. So my dad ran over. I thought he was going to kill me, but I think he just appreciated my passion. And yeah, they signed me up, and that was the start of that. Changed my life. My first master, the things that they teach you, especially at that time as a little kid, I just I ate it up. My parents both raised me with, the the tenets of good behavior and respect and all these principles and morals. But the master just reinforced all of that, and because it was something that I was so passionate about, there was always an element of fear, because, like I said, there was repercussions for poor technique, repercussions for poor behavior, and repercussions for poor grades. It was a very old school place like that couldn't survive today now. But back then, I understood, if I want to do this, this is what I got to deal with. And I just got it through it. And it changed my life. And I remember as a little kid thinking, I want to be a black belt someday. I want to be a champion. I want to have my own dojo. As a little kid, I told myself that. And then just, life goes on, and we moved, and I had to eventually stop training there. And then I kind of took a break for a little while. And then when I got old enough and I was working and making my own money, I just said, I'm going back. I need to start doing martial arts again. And by this time I was about 17, and I just found a school in the city that I lived in. And then I started then, and I just never stopped until I found Jean Jacques.
Was that Taekwondo as well, or you pivoted into?
Yeah, the follow-up school. No, I did. I started with Taekwondo, and then the school that I started up in when I was 17 was Hapkido, which is Korean.
Yeah.
I did that for a few years, and then I moved on to another school that was like Tang Sudo, Taekwondo. It's kind of not a hybrid. Very famous martial artist. His name was Byung Yu. He fought in the heyday of Benny Urquidez and all those guys. And then I stopped that style altogether when I was like 20, 21, 22, Chinese Kenpo. I discovered Chinese Kenpo. And the teacher that I was studying under then, he was a phenomenal boxer and kickboxer. And it was kind of neat because he discovered a glaring weakness in what I thought was a decent skill set, was that I had no hands. I could keep anybody at bay with my feet because I was classically trained that way, but I had no hands. So he'd get inside and just pick me apart. So he brought that side out of me. He kind of, again, balance. I'd relied too much on my feet, no hands. So I became pretty good with both. And then a few years later, this guy comes walking in, and we knew him. He would just bounce in from time to time, and he's like, I got to show you some stuff, man. These guys in the South Bay, it's like this Brazilian street fighting. Didn't call it jiu-jitsu. And he just very rudimentary broke it down. You go to punch, they clinch, they trip you. You go down, they choke you. And he did it on a couple of the guys. And I'm like, that's interesting. And then we kind of just forgot about it. And it was like, a year or two later, we hear about the UFC and the Gracies, and the rest was history.
So at which point do you stumble upon Jean Jacques? When does the true jiu-jitsu journey begins?
Yeah, that was well, technically I started grappling. Like I switched from striking to grappling. Shouldn't say switched, I added it. Around 95, 96, I'd read all the magazines, and it's really quite funny because there was a couple of magazines about the Machado brothers that I kept inside the dojo I was training at, and I'd read them in between classes. And to this day, I live about an hour away from Jean Jacques' school. There was a school out here by where I lived. They taught grappling because back then there were no black belts. You get students that were blue belts, or they had a little experience, and they would basically, as far as I was concerned, they were teaching underground. They didn't want their teachers to know that they were teaching. So I went into this one school, and the guy's like, yeah, we do jiu-jitsu, we do a little sambo. The instructor was supposedly a blue belt under Hegan. So I started training there. They let me come in from time to time. It wasn't a full-fledged grappling school. And the guy, he showed me some techniques, and I really liked it. It was like a new stimulus for me because rolling around on the ground, I'd never done that before. But then one night, there was a flyer at a restaurant. We were going to a restaurant. We saw this flyer, and it said Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Seminar. So I'm like, okay, this is obviously going to be something different. So I went, and it was a brown belt, and he was fighting Vale Tudo. He was one of the coaches of Mark Kerr. He was going to Brazil. This was back in 97. Super nice guy. But that seminar just told me, yeah, I gotta learn this. It was just a different level. And one of the gentlemen that was at the seminar trained at the Machado Academy. Because at this time, there were only 3 or 4 schools. You had the Gracie Academy in Torrance. You had Hicks and Gracie in West Hollywood. The Machado brothers had a school by the beach, and then one up in the San Fernando Valley, which is close to where I'm at. And then there was Gokar Chivichian, who's a very famous judo sambo black belt. So I wound up at Jean Jacques because of this gentleman, this guy that I met. And yeah, that was an amazing time because it was a completely different culture back then. And for the record, I made 2 commitments to my wife. I said, number 1, I will never teach. You never have to worry about me teaching. And my internal goal, my dream was, I hope someday I can be a purple belt. I thought black belt was just an impossibility. So this goes back to this.
So you didn't keep neither one of those promises.
No. Well, because the school that I was at, the Chinese Kenpo school, it was failing. My teacher, my Sifu, he was just burnt out. He was a great guy, but he was just burnt out. So the burden of everything fell on me for a lot. I was basically running the place, managing it. He'd drop in. He was not furthering my development. I felt like I was at the end of that technical palette. So it sounds horrible to say, but thankfully the school just went out of business. And then we didn't really go our separate ways, but I just said, that's it, I'm done. Because I didn't want to teach anymore. I was so disenfranchised that I just promised my wife, I'm like, I really love jiu-jitsu. It's so much fun to be a student. I'm going to sit in the corner. I don't even really want to get to know the teacher. I just want to train and learn and have fun. And here I am now talking to you guys.
So at that point, when you go to Jean Jacques or to the Machado Academy, you have extensive stand-up experience. You have some striking in a variety of flavors. You have some grappling. You at least you know what this jiu-jitsu thing is, right? Even though at that point you kind of dipping into a blue belt and brown belt teaching. Have you met black belt at that point yet, or that's to happen?
Have I trained with a black belt?
Right.
Yes, yeah. My first teacher at the Machado Academy was a gentleman named Hanato Magno.
No, I mean before you got to Machado.
Oh, before.
Academy.
No.
Okay. So you have some experience, but you've never met or trained with a black belt at that point, and you go to Machado Academy for the very first time. Talk to me about that experience. The first day, first time you're stepping on the mat.
Yeah. First of all, the seminar that I did prior, the gentleman was a brown belt. Okay. So he was at a high level. He was really at a high level. But, perception is everything. It's, you see brown, and I understood what a brown belt meant. And it was very clear because I rolled with him. I'm like, yeah, this is a skill level far beyond what I would have, what I can comprehend. But then, yes, when I went to the Machado Academy, I just remember I don't know if you guys remember this, Century Martial Arts made of blue and white reversible judo gi. The sleeves were probably a foot long from your wrist down, and the skirt would go down to my knees. And I come rolling in there, and the guys just salivated when they looked at me. The teacher was super cool, which because I was intimidated, but it was just like everything else. I wanted to learn this so much that I'm like, I'm down. I'm here. I want to learn, and I'm willing to go through the struggle to just learn this amazing art. And yeah, it was, I met a couple of nice guys, but for the most part, everyone was pretty, I don't want to say standoffish, but I got the impression nobody really wanted to get to know you. You were just a body. But Professor Hanato was super cool. He was very warm and welcoming. And it was the thing that attracted me to the art more than anything else. And it's why my wife always embraced me doing this, even before I started teaching, was that she said, traditional martial arts, guys get to a certain level, they start to marvel at their own magnificence. Like, I am this supreme black belt. I'm too deadly to train with you. So you go train with the beginners, very unapproachable. I mean, the ego, of course, just is through the roof. But in jiu-jitsu, Professor Hanato, this black belt, this amazing black belt who could just tie me into knots. He was so sweet and so kind. And he would train with me. And he was a representation. That's why I'm like, if this is what a black belt is, if this is the benchmark, I don't know if I could do that. It was inspiring. And then, of course, I'd see the blue belts and the purple belts, but he was the one I'm like, man, this is incredible. And I went to a tournament a week later. It was the Joe Moreira Invitational. And that tournament back in the 90s was amazing because you go into Google, type all the famous black belts, they were probably there. I saw, who's who. I sat there at the concession area and had Carlson Gracie Sr. walk up next to me. He was eating a hot dog. Didn't speak a word of English, but I smiled. I shook his hand, tried to communicate as briefly as I could. But I'm like, oh my God, this is Carlson Gracie Sr. It was pretty cool. It was amazing. All the high level guys were super nice. They left such an impression.
Anytime we have somebody who's been on the mat for so long as you have and had this opportunity to interact with some of those pioneers, if you will, that generation before you, I often ask, did you comprehend the level of magnitude of what was happening around you at that point of time? Like, do you sink that in? Do you understand that Carlson Gracie Sr., it's eating a hot dog next to you?
I will tell you right now, to give you this is going to be probably the most clear answer I could ever give you. My first day at the Jean Jacques Academy, they taught armbar from the closed guard. And the first time I tried it, in my head, I'm going, Jesus Christ, this is what Helio Gracie does. This is what Carlos Gracie did. Like, I'm learning their technique. When you come up in other arts, it's rare to find an instructor who is a direct lineage to the founder of an art. It's usually broken. I learned a little bit here. I learned a little bit here. You ask them, like, can you trace your lineage? Most can. Not all, but most can. But this is a pure art. And so, yes, when I went to that tournament and I saw Carlson Gracie, I was like, oh my God, I only wish I had a smartphone because I couldn't take a picture with him, nothing. But yes, I very much remember, meeting him. To give you an understanding, back when I used to do point fighting and I did a Hapkido tournament, I got to meet a gentleman named Han J.G., who was a Hapkido grandmaster. And he was one of, if you ever saw the Bruce Lee movie when he goes up the tower, Game of Death, he fights the Hapkido master who wears a white and gold gi. That was Han J.G. Oh. I shook his hand and I was like, I was just like starstruck, and it's not because that he's this amazing martial artist, but of his connection to the legacy of the art. And people like Carlson Gracie Sr., I've been fortunate to meet. Well, I didn't really meet him. We had a brief exchange, but Hickson Gracie, I tell everybody I work in LA. I teach celebrities. I'm around celebrities. I don't really get starstruck. But if you're one of the pioneers of this art, I'm dropping everything and I'm going to find my way to get you to take a picture with me or talk to you or something, because those are the people that you want to hopefully get some level of interaction with, because they're iconic.
What's interesting is I'm listening to you talk about this, and there's clear passion just radiating from everything that all the stories that you're sharing. How do you feel about people actually looking up to you in a similar fashion? Because you've been on the mat for, a while. You've been teaching, even though you said you wouldn't. You've been teaching for a long time. You clearly making an impact on the next generations, and many students look up to you in a similar fashion as you are describing, looking up to Helio or Carlson or Jean Jacques or many others out there. What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, it's very hard. I'm learning to embrace it more. I don't know. I think I come from, because of the mats that I came up on, because of the environment through jiu-jitsu that I came up on, and you see the people that are around you, and to equate yourself in some level where people respect you or follow you, or I don't ever believe for a minute that anybody puts me on that kind of level, but you do gain a following, you do gain people that verbalize that level of respect. And I'm learning to embrace it. I'm learning to be more comfortable with it. I'm not a big marketer. I'm not a big, I don't know how you'd say it. I think my identity is based on the fact that my ability to work with people is that I want them to understand that I'm exactly like you. I've only been doing this a lot longer than you, but everything that you're going through, I've been there. Exactly. I am direct proof that if I can do it, you can do it. If you stick with it, you'll probably be better than me. But I don't want you to ever feel like, and I say this with all respect because I've mentioned this before, you see people like Jean Jacques, like Hickson, Carlson Gracie, all of the high level masters. That's all we know. I can't even visualize or comprehend a white belt Hickson Gracie who struggled and doesn't understand jiu-jitsu. Like that doesn't equate in my head. To me, they're like demigods. They were born knowing this. But to identify with somebody who's struggled and continues to struggle, that's kind of where I'm most comfortable. But I do get a lot of that, and it's something that I appreciate very much. I'm always mindful to acknowledge it and be grateful for.
You just a moment ago you said, or you mentioned that you continue struggling. Is that something that is visible in your jiu-jitsu on a regular basis?
No, it's just more that from the standpoint of I don't ever want people thinking that I've got all the answers. Give you an example, like we've resurrected, even though it's Jean Jacques Machado, for a long time we didn't have no-gi classes. So I helped resurrect that. We run a couple of no-gi classes during the week. I generally teach them. Jean Jacques will roll in when he's available, and he'll teach. But one of the things that we're really stressing in that class, and it's a closed class for this reason, we don't allow drop-ins, but it's anything goes. It's like heel hooks, the reaps, the knee bars, twisting leg locks, calf locks, everything. So the leg game is something that I am really starting to deep dive in. I have a general knowledge of it because I used to compete no-gi a lot, but the sport has evolved so much with that area of expertise. So I am studying, but what I'm also doing is I'm working because we have a handful of guys that are pretty proficient with their leg game. I'm sticking my legs out there constantly. I'm going after my new entries that I'm practicing. I want to shore up on my defense. So I allow them to get into their entries, and more often than not, I'm the one tapping. And I've had to make all of them understand, I'm like, this is no gi. I'm not wearing my belt. I don't care if you're a blue belt, purple belt. Right now, we're all no gi. I want to develop my game. And how can I get you to understand the concept of allow yourself to let go, allow yourself to be vulnerable. If you get caught, tap, learn, grow, you'll develop more. How can I expect you to follow that if I don't practice it myself? So that's kind of sort of part of the struggle. It's not the struggle that I feel like my game is not developing. It's just the struggle to understand that I don't have all the answers. And in order to learn more, I have to put myself out there more to struggle more.
Well, I think what's important really is for those who listen is that oftentimes, black belt is looked upon as somebody who has all the answers, somebody who knows everything, somebody, I'm struggling with, I'm going to ask them. And in most cases, we can help. That's why we are there, to guide students, give them answers, motivate, inspire, and so on in order for them to continue growing. But you're talking about different level of humbleness. You're talking about, it doesn't matter what belt I am. I'm trying to learn this because this is the area where I need improvement. And it doesn't matter. I need to put myself in the vulnerable spots. I need to fail, essentially. I need to trip over and, be submitted or be trapped or be controlled in order for me to find these points of discovery and continue evolving, continue learning. Otherwise, it'll never happen. Gary,
Go
ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I forget who it was that we had in here, and they were saying that they love no-gi not because of the physicality of it, but because there's nobody on the mat with a belt. People don't look to him for those answers or treat him differently. It's like if it's a purple belt that he doesn't know, right? He doesn't know that person's a purple belt. That purple belt doesn't know he's a black belt or who he is. They're going to have a much more organic time on the mat than if it's, can I ask that black belt if we can roll? Do I have to wait for them to ask me? Or even being like, oh, no, I know what this guy, I think I have an idea of what this person knows. So I guess I'm just going to let them play their game because I'm only, and I'm going to have to look that up to see who it was. But I thought that was phenomenal because they weren't looking at it from the game of the gi versus the no gi. It was about that patriarchal, the belt system wasn't existent.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly it. I mean, at our school, there is an element of respect that has to just emulate across the board. I mean, the students kind of police each other, but Jean Jacques is very vocal about it. I'm very vocal about it. But if my gi is, even with the gi, I tell every student I am not unapproachable. I don't care if you're a brand new white belt and you come up to me and you ask me to train. My response is going to be my honor to train with you. I don't get put off by that. I respect the fact that culturally and maybe in other academies that's not the case. Maybe in other academies it's like, no, you have to respect the hierarchy and you don't ask a black belt. I respect in that school, I would respect that and I acknowledge that. But this goes back to me. I don't feel like I'm so superior to somebody that I'm unapproachable. I want the student to feel with respect. I kind of joke with them. I'm like, if you come up to me and you snap your fingers at me, you might get a different J. But if you just ask me, hey, professor, can we train? Of course, I would love to train with you. But no-gi takes it a step further because that's exactly it. That's a great point. I tell them, I'm like, I'm not wearing a belt. So, let's have fun. And, but going back, what I was going to say earlier is one of the things that I am adamant about, and it's part of my development. And it's something I tell the students too. I'm like, look, I think I believe in a beautiful submission. The submission is the finality. It represents, the really precise execution of your technique. I go, but one of the things that I love just as much as getting a good armbar or a triangle, I love being under that 260-pound purple belt who's half my age. He's mounted on me. He's got me crushed, and I get out. I see you struggling with somebody. I want to see you. If you're, I don't care what level you are, put yourself in a bad spot and work your way out. And if you don't work your way out, have pride in the fact that you went in there and you put yourself in the worst spot and you were looking to level up your game. Because there's a place and a time for practicing the offense and sharpening the offense. But to me, the long game, the game that's going to take me into my 60s and 70s will always be my defense and my ability to protect myself. And I tell students that I'm like, never, ever think that as instructors, if we're watching you and we see a submission that we're going to equate that like, well, he's good and that guy's no good. It's like, no, I'm looking at the submission, but I'm also looking at the person that got caught. What were they doing? How were they protecting themselves? If you got caught, but you were doing everything right, but they just wore you down, man, I'm going to come right up to you and tell you amazing job. I love the fact that you're out there pushing yourself in the best way possible, the most honest way possible. And that's making yourself vulnerable. I always tell people, embrace the struggle because that's how you grow.
Yeah. I mean, that's what jiu-jitsu is by definition, embracing that struggle over extensive period of time.
Well, one of my favorite quotes is, it is said no tree can reach heaven unless its roots reach hell. Then that's jiu-jitsu.
I like that.
Thomas is going to steal that.
Oh, I'm totally stealing.
Yeah, I left you
I'm
guys
huge. I'm
speechless,
huge
didn't
on.
I?
I'm huge on books. I'm huge on phrases. I'm huge on quotes. I am completely stealing that one. It's official. I love that. That's so deep.
Hey, real quick,
That's
you've been teaching kids for a really long time too, right?
yes,
How
yes.
how do you convey that sentiment? Because that's too much. I think that's too much for a kid to really comprehend, maybe.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
how do you get them over? Perfect example is I'm not coaching kids anymore, but my daughter is a student, and I saw her get swept, and arms went out flat, and I was just like, I'm so glad I'm not on the mats with her right now, you know. But it was, how do you teach them that, you know, these things are going to happen, and it's good, and it's part of all of it, without, I don't know, coming off heavy-handed or giving them too much to comprehend?
Oh, I have a speech that I give all the kids because it resonates. I tell them, look, you know, all you guys, you have to understand something. When you're born with a superpower. We're all born with a superpower. That superpower is hidden deep within our heart. And you cannot just access it. You have to work really hard and struggle to find that superpower. The superpower is allowing yourself, I don't like to use the word suffer, but I just say you're going to struggle. It's going to be hard. This is going to be hard for you to get through. Your professors, teachers, we're going to always be here to make sure you don't get hurt. But we can't rescue you when you're going through this. The superpower only unlocks if you keep going. If you keep going, you're going to see how this is going to help you accomplish anything you want in your life. And the reason why we get you in here and the reason why we're constantly encouraging you is, you know how many people are out in the world that are older that sadly never unlock that superpower and their life is unfulfilled. Like, you guys have a jump start. Not everybody knows this. You guys have a jump start. You have that superpower. I want to see you guys unlock it. How do you unlock it? You unlock it by coming in here every day. I don't mind if you struggle. I don't mind if you tap out. I don't mind if you fail today. Real failure is the day you walk through to the up front and you say, I don't want to do this anymore, I quit. Then that stays locked away. You need to keep coming in and you're going to watch your life change. I try to encourage them in that manner. I want to make sure they understand that my pride for them comes from the struggle, not the victories. The victories are going to come no matter what. But until that happens, you're going to be struggling a lot. And it's important that you understand that means just as much to me as your coach as when you start winning. So that's kind of how I approach it with kids.
I mean, that's deep. That's deep, and I bet their wheels are turning in many directions just by listening to that story or to that phrase that you just shared with us. I mean, that's so phenomenal. You've been on the mat for a long time. You've done many martial arts, many flavors, many disciplines. You know, you've talked about some of them here. If you had to pinpoint the one lesson, the one day, the one moment that pivoted everything, completely opened the next level, changed the way how you think or process, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good one. I can tell you one thing that I stress. It helped me tremendously. I was a fresh black belt. And I was very backwards in everything that I did, everything that I do. I competed a little bit, like I'd mentioned you, white belt, and I did a little bit at blue belt. And then life pulled me in a different direction. I didn't compete at all for many years. I didn't compete most of my blue belt. I didn't compete at purple or brown. But the night I got my black belt, I thought, what now? It's this amazing accomplishment, but then you're kind of left with what's on the horizon for me. So I just thought, for me to really put my belt to work and embrace it, I'm going to start competing. Granted, I had just turned 40, but we have options, lots of options to compete in the older age divisions. So I started doing tournaments. And, I was just struggling. Like part of it was first it was like, I just want to win some matches at black belt. Then you start winning and then it's like, well, now I want to get to the podium. And then you get to the podium and it's like, no, I want to get to the top. And you're just chasing that. And I was not able to really crack that level. So we had there's a black belt here in LA named Kleber Luciano. He's like, I think now 6th degree black belt under Hickson and Hoyler Gracie. He's an amazing competitor, amazing black belt. He has a tournament. It still goes on today, the Copa Pacifica. And he had his event and I registered for it. We sent, I think, 5 or 6, 7 black belts from our school went down there. Well, back then, there was no athlete list. There was nothing. You just show up and I kind of eyeball you, weight, age. Okay, close enough. You guys go, So, and they were all super fights. So they'd stop the tournament for the black belt super fights. Well, Jean Jacques shows up. And I'm like, oh, that's cool, because I didn't expect him to be there. He comes up to me and says hi, and then he excuses himself and he goes to the head table. And then he comes back and he's like, puts his arm around me and whispers in my ear. He's like, I put you with Kleber. He goes, he doesn't know your game. He goes, and I know you can beat him. Now, mind you, that tournament I went to a week after I joined the academy as a white belt. And I watched Kleber, who was a black belt then, mop up his opponent, just destroy him. Now I'm standing across from him. And I was just like, thanks, Jean Jacques. I appreciate that, So we get at it. And I won't lie, he clearly had my number in terms of like, he just dominated the match, but move for move, I stayed with him. I just kept moving. Right towards the end of the match, just like 20 seconds left. He went to attack my back and I kind of like inverted and went for his leg and then he grabbed my foot. And I felt him torquing my foot and I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to break my foot in front of this crowd. So I just tapped. I was honestly, of course you're always disappointed when you lose, but that match, something in my head shifted. That match told me, you got to stop thinking like, well, I'm just going to struggle and hopefully this tournament will be better. In the most respectful of ways, it switched to, no, I belong out there. And the very next tournament I did was the 2009 Pans, and I won my division, my first black belt championship. And I credit that solely to Jean Jacques pushing me in a place that I didn't think I could be. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about faith, having faith in your teacher. He's been my only jiu-jitsu instructor. And what he's done for my life is, I can't even put it into words. But the one thing that we have, and I try to impart this on our students, I'm like, you got to understand that we don't play favorites. I don't have a favorite student. I don't even have students that bother me. I treat everyone the same. So if I'm making an effort to help you, you got to have some faith in the words I'm giving you and follow it. It's almost blind faith. But if you have faith in your instructor, it can change your whole game. But again, it goes back to that, you really want me to do this? So that was a complete turning point for me in my career as a competitor and even as an instructor. It just catapulted me.
I love that story.
That's great.
I love that story.
Yeah.
Well, you promised your wife you will never teach, and now you do teach for a living, and you obviously it plays a significant role, part of what you do, who you are, and so on. But at the same time, you speak quite a bit about continuous education. You continue learning. You're putting yourself in the vulnerable spots. If you had to pick one, student or instructor, which one is more important to you?
Ooh, that's a good question. Instructor. I say instructor because to be an instructor, it's not about you. As a student, it's all about you. And it has to be. That's how you develop.
Yeah.
As an instructor, I represent something much bigger than myself. And I have such a tremendous responsibility to the people around me. So it would definitely be instructor.
I'm smiling and laughing. Gary's gonna laugh at me again, but
Here comes Sanjay.
Sanjay Ribeiro. I just love the conversation.
I gotta get a bell.
Every
time you do this.
I keep bringing it up. I do because it was a great conversation. But one of the things he said is being a student, being an athlete is a very selfish act, and being an instructor is selfless. You have to give everything away.
Yes.
It's all about them. It's not about you. And many don't see it that way, and that's why I just love it. I love that approach to life and to jiu-jitsu specifically. You do have to put yourself behind your students.
Is that the biggest difference between so-called traditional martial arts and jiu-jitsu, do you think, in the instructors?
Oh, I definitely think that. Jean Jacques himself has told me, he goes, you have two types of instructors. You have the instructor that teaches out of the passion and love for wanting to give to his students. And then you have the guy that teaches for his ego. And that's the balance. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is what it is. I always believe to be a teacher. It's funny because I talk about this with my wife. I'm like, given my work as it is now, sometimes I wish I could be doing this when I'm 30, but I'm glad I'm doing it now, because 30, I don't think I had the emotional maturity to do it like I do it now. Now I have such an easier way of taking a step away from myself, making it about the student, not being judgmental about the actions of others, learning how to just take the energy as it comes. Some of it I absorb, a lot of it I let go, and just being mindful on the work. The work is the most important thing. When I teach, I always explain to people, it's like when I teach, when I compete, whatever it is, I represent something far greater than myself. So that's how I try to conduct myself. That's how I try to interact with students. I want them to understand that when they come in, not that it matters, but I was on a podcast recently, and the guy said, he goes, you don't really strike me as a like outgoing personality guy, like flamboyant. I'm like, no, that's just not me, and part of that is that's just not me by nature. But the other part is that to represent someone like Jean Jacques, to me, it's like, you have to be a professional. You have to have not just the technique, but the presence. Because I've spent enough time with Jean Jacques, and to this day, I tell people, like, when I used to compete, I could feel when he'd walk up to the coach's chair. I didn't have to hear him. I'd just turn around and he has that stare, and I'm like, whoa, kind of keeps me straight. And his voice was like a defibrillator. He wouldn't say much. I'd be out there doing my thing, and if he needed me to do something, he'd just speak, and then my body would just jump and respond. So that's why we keep the lineage pictures up in the school. It's like you have this greater responsibility that you have to live up to.
Do you feel that there's pressure on you to carry on that responsibility, that lineage, that represent yourself in a certain way because of what you do?
I wouldn't say like pressure, like an obligation to continue. Like you have to go out and work, and you have to teach, and you have to do these things. I don't really look at it from that standpoint. I just look at it more from the standpoint of I have this beautiful art that I've spent half my life studying. And in the same way we talked about at the beginning of this, the purging of things, it's like, I have to give it away. I can't keep it. I would be doing myself such a disservice. That's why I'm just so overjoyed to see Rickson Gracie giving so much of his knowledge away now. He's putting it out there, because for a long time, he was a closed door. Unless you trained with him, you had no idea what he offered. And now it's amazing, So I feel like that's something that we have to do. And it's something that I always try to tell the students. It's like, I want to make you twice as good as I ever was, and I want to do it in half the time it took me. It's like, and I want to make sure that you're going to make all your own mistakes. I don't want you making my mistakes. It's like just trying to give as much as you possibly can. And the beautiful thing about that is everything that's happened around me with my life, with my responsibilities and teaching and everything, that all came organically. it all came organically as a result of the work and the energy that I put out. I'm not really much of a marketer, don't really sell myself. I have social media, but I just, I do what I can when I can. But I feel like Al Pacino had a great quote, something about like, forget the business, forget the money, just do the work. If you do the work and you love what you do and you do quality work, opportunities will come, but focus on the work. And I know I use the word work because I don't consider what I do work, but there's still effort involved in it. It requires a certain level of discipline and dedication. And, so that's part of that. But I don't need to be motivated to get up in the morning to do what I do because I love it so much.
I love it. Focus on the process. Don't focus on the results, right? It's
absolutely.
We often talk about this. Well, believe it or not, we've been at this for more than an hour at this point. This is the downfall of these good conversations that we just run out of time. But before we wrap this up, and this is we're going to put you on a spot here, but at the end of every episode, what we do, we ask a question from a previous guest, but he had no clue you will be answering it. Okay, so it's kind of a question in a blind, if you will, from a previous guest that we had on the show. Gary's going to take a lead on this and always leads into interesting end of the episode.
Yeah, so this is from one of the Dirty Dozen. This is from Ken Gabrielson. And he wants to know, what is the biggest difference between your students and how you were as a student?
Oh, that's a great question. Biggest difference. I think the biggest difference is that the students of today have far more access to the information and the art than I ever did. My friend affectionately joked, back when we were coming up, every technique, it was like the first time you discover fire. There was such an enthusiasm. You don't really get the wow factor today because most people have seen a lot of the stuff that you teach. So today, I think it's just access to greater information, which helps accelerate development, which I think is beneficial to the development of the art. That would be my answer.
Let me ask you a follow-up question. Do you think that access to information that we experience in today, everything, everywhere, right now, is that more of a benefit or is it more of a curse in a sense of saturation of the information that we have?
That's a great question. I think it's like food. I think you can binge, you can overeat.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens. I think it's just it's like a diet. A healthy amount of information, maybe you're learning things in the academy and you want to do a little homework, a little supplemental information. The problem is, and this is a thing that I see a lot, and I actually had a discussion with another instructor about this. You have these people now, and this is the hard part, and this is where it can stunt your development. Maybe I'm working with you on cross-body escapes, side control escapes, and I want to focus on some aspect of the escape. We address it in class, and then you'll overhear somebody say, well, yeah, but so-and-so does it like this. I saw this on YouTube. This guy does it like this. That's not to discount the material that he's learning, but it's hindering him because before he goes there, he needs to be here. We'll get to that point, but you need to be focused here. I call it the chameleon effect. It's like, it's the same thing as the story of there's a famous legendary story of a martial artist that traveled to this dojo and wanted to learn. And when he meets the master, he says, how long will it take to get a black belt? And the master says 10 years. And he goes, that takes too long. What if I train twice as hard? And he goes, 20 years.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
He goes, why did I tell you? Have you heard that story?
Oh, absolutely. It's a great story.
Yeah. So the tech, it's the same thing with teaching the technique. If one eye is on one other technique and you're not focused on this, it's going to take you twice as long to become proficient at this escape because you're not focused on the material. And the difference between what you're learning on YouTube as opposed to what I'm teaching you is I'm the one that's connected with you. I know what's best for you. This goes back to have a little faith in what the instructor is trying to do for you because he's the one that's sharing the mat with you. So going back to that, yes, I think I always encourage the students. I'm like, I have no problem with you supplementing your knowledge, but try not to stray too far away from the work that we're doing in here because it can cause more harm than good.
Healthy balance. It
Yes.
always boils down to that, and the unfortunate part, and I think a lot, I think a lot of academies, a lot of students, even instructors struggle with this today. The oversaturation of, it's not even oversaturation, I think. It's like the distraction of the information that's being thrown at us is so dangerous that,
Yes.
it's just very risky. Like you see some students, doing, these, and listen, call me old school, call me whatever, but like there are students who know these elaborate entries and flashy, positions and transitions, but they don't know how to do hip escape, or they don't know how to escape from a basic positions of frame. Like it is a struggle. It is a struggle out there. So I'm hoping that we can make a positive impact and continue, continue learning this beautiful art. Gary, sorry,
No, that's fine. I was just going to say, we had an amazing seminar here. Felipe Costa was here, and he was showing the way he hip escapes, the way he escapes from cross side. And I thought while he was doing it, I was like, okay, but somebody's going to take your back. Now, I didn't express it because I know that at some point he was probably going to address it. And so I let somebody else express it, and which was funny. But yeah, of course, we led up to that. And I think that what happens is when you have all this information, it's very easy to discredit things too, to be like, because it's not super cool, or, you see that there's an opportunity there. And, I could have been like, he's just going to jump over and take my back. I'm done, and I'm not going to pay that much attention anymore today or anything like that. But, knowing who was teaching us, I knew that there was going to be a follow-up there. So don't keep your eye on what's right in front of you, and not, something far off, something lofty. Just keep working on those little things that are right there in front of you. That's all.
Yeah.
I was about to say that's your contribution to today's episode.
That is.
Sorry, Professor. We there is an interesting dynamic here. So.
Oh yeah, no, I have one as well here as well at our academy. No, I to add to that, it's I remember I had a few colleagues that started when I started that broke away because they felt they weren't learning enough. It's like they would say, "Oh, you have to have 5 ways to escape side control. You have to have 10 techniques from the closed guard." They equated a number, like a volume. And I'm like, I would tell them, I'm like, yeah, but can you escape side control? You say you have to have 5 ways. So if someone pins you, that means out of those 5, you can get out. You can tell me right now that you can get out. I don't know about you. I can't get out. So I'm going to just stay here and trust in my teacher. And I know he'll help me get out. And you become disillusioned when you're thinking in terms of tangible objectives instead of the feel. Because that's the thing about jiu-jitsu. When I teach a technique, or especially when we go into Q&A and a student has a question, I cannot sit on the side and point and tell you how to fix it. I need to feel what you're doing, and then I need you to feel what I'm doing back, because the visual is never the same as the feel.
Yeah. It is. That's the hard part behind jiu-jitsu, right? That there is so many dynamics, comprehension points, focus points, and we all think differently. That
Yes.
creates even that third layer of complexity, if you will, is no matter how I explain to you, no matter how I'm teaching me or anybody else for that matter, your ability to receive the information will be different than the person sitting next to you. And well, but that's why this is so amazing. That's why, we keep doing this, because.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So, before we wrap this up, would you find jiu-jitsu more physically or mentally stimulating as we kind of wrapping this up, with these thoughts?
The early days, it was all physical. The early day was absolutely physical. Now it's mental. It's all mental. I can't even put it into words. It's pretty amazing. I give you an example. I'll just leave you with this. I had during COVID, I built a space in my garage. It had nothing to do with COVID. I had traveled a lot in 2019, and then right at the end of the year, I told my wife, I said, I want my own space. Like everybody has like a man cave. I have a 3-car garage. I'm like, I want the single car spot. I want to build a dojo in there. And it was a whole odyssey of purging. I had so much storage stuff like that I had accumulated, and I donated most of it. It was painful, but I got rid of everything, made a space. So whenever we have, and I have a couple of guys that I train, but we had an appliance guy show up 2 weeks ago. He sees the space, him and his buddy. And his first words were, man, this jiu-jitsu, right? You could kick somebody's ass and you can do this and do that. And I'm like, well, yeah, you could. And he's like, you don't think so? And I'm like, no, I know so. I go, but that's not why I do it. And he's like, I don't understand. I'm like, okay, you mind if I give you a little demo? And he's like, yeah. And I go, just slowly throw a punch. So he throws a punch and I block it and I clinch with him. I move to the side, I immobilize his arm and I hold on to him. I'm like, from here, we have 2 choices. I can escalate this, which I don't want to do. I can hurt you. But why are we doing this? You probably cut in front of me in the supermarket. It was probably something so inconsequential in both our lives, but it's a moment of emotion that has reached this point. Instead, what if I do this? And I held him close and I said, hey, man, and I pulled him close to me and I said, I'm sorry. Whatever I did, I'm sorry. I don't want to hurt you. I hope you don't want to hurt me. Can I let you go? I'll buy you lunch. Cool, man. And I gave him a hug and his eyes welled up. He was like, oh, man, that's deep. Oh, shit, that's deep. Like it blew him away that my whole response was, I don't want to fight you. But the closeness, the connection that we make physically with one another, that's the one thing that this beautiful art gives us that no other art gives us. We can escalate, we can de-escalate. That comes from feel. It's not something you can demonstrate. And this is the mental aspect. This is how I approach my technique. Somebody's pushing on me really hard. My objective isn't to push back. I just get out of your way, hold you, and just kind of it's very non-combative. So that it's part physical, but it's more mental for me.
I love it. I need like a day to process all of this. Listen, Professor, we got to wrap this up. I know you are busy with your day and we do want to let you go. But before you depart, where can listeners find you? If anybody wants to connect with you, what's in store for you? What do you do? Where are you? I mean, just, share kind of a personal information there if anybody wants to reach out.
Yeah, no, it's pretty easy. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, the two main ones. It's just my name, Jay Zeballos. I'm on Jean Jacques' website as well, jeanjacquesmachado.com. I mean, he has his YouTube channel. I'm probably 80% of the videos. I'm the guy that he's choking and strangling because a little history. We were the first ones to do an online program back in 2006. I helped build that for him. So we go back many, many years, but yeah, we have that. Pretty easy to find. As far as like what I do, I'm glued to that academy. I'm glued to his side. I just felt like my life, I was just drawn to stay there. I had no desire to branch out. We opened a school together for a while in Malibu, and then they had the big fires on the West Coast back in 2018, and we lost the school. And it's just been one of those things where, I always tell people life is an EKG monitor. You have ups and downs. And Malibu, when we built it, it was an up. We lost it, it was a down. But when that went away, I started to build a big private client base. And I travel a lot, do seminars. I manage our association. So it keeps me very busy, but I'm a full-time instructor. It's just, it's a path that's given me so much joy and fulfillment. Don't compete that much anymore because, again, I can't be selfish. I want to give more to the students. And that's where I'm at. It's jiu-jitsu 24/7 for me.
I love it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for spending, hour or so with us talking and sharing really your experience and your passion. And it's unquestionable how much love is, just radiating from everything that you're saying. So I truly do appreciate you being here and sharing and chatting with us a little bit.
Yeah, and if for people who don't know, we always do a takeaway after this, and I've got a ton of stuff. We're going to have a hard time choosing today of what we're going to talk about after this. So I thank you for that, because sometimes we get stuck, and we're not going to get stuck today. So
I appreciate you guys.
Thank you
very
so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, let's wrap this up for today. Thanks for being here, Gary.
Yeah.
Good one. Thanks for your contribution today. You did great.
Hey, listen, you told me, you were like, that's all you got? And then we went for like 15 more minutes. So I think I did okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Professor. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.